All right, so hello everyone. I am Adi, a GD in Angular, but like fascinated by AI and really fascinated by what Google has been cooking with the ADK, the Agent Development Kit. I have the pleasure of being here with Ayo Adedeji, who's the Senior Developer Advocate. So basically that means that like when we guys get out of line, he bring us back in. But he's going to be talking about ADK. If you have been working with any type of agentic workflow, he's kind of the new kid on the block, but it comes like packing a punch because it's very intuitive, has seen like a widespread adoption on enterprise. So we want to find out more. So, but before I go into the formal interview, I'm going to give Ayo a minute or two to say his role in ADK and how he came about being a part of this exciting project.
Absolutely. Yeah, so as Adi mentioned, my job as a senior developer advocate is essentially to show developers how to solve problems in their code, using Google's AI. And since earlier this year when ADK was released, ADK has been central to that mission in showing developers how to use agents and deploy them safely and kind of reach to production quickly in an efficient way. So my job is essentially to create code samples, to create architectures that show developers how to get from point A to point B a lot quicker. Yeah.
Oh, sounds good. And as I was mentioning, there's already quite a few enterprise clients that are already buying in. But before those enterprise clients, it is good to understand that Google themselves are adopting ADK in the Google products. Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely, that's a great point. Where I was actually just talking with the PM for ADK, Julia, and we were thinking of actually creating what we call like a PR review assistant that we would deploy as part of our GitHub repo that's actually reviewing the code using ADK, multi-agent architecture. So it's a really great example of actually using ADK in production to kind of actually review our own code. And there's a lot of workflows and projects going on like that where we're actually implementing ADK directly into our own workflows on the Google side. So it's very production ready, and we're using it and happy to do so.
Yeah. In the culture, they call that like drinking your own Kool-Aid. So at the end of the day, yeah, that's good to see that before anybody adopts it, you as as a big company are the first one using it. But now you said you help a lot of developers with their workflow. What is the most common things that you feel like? Because it seems pretty intuitive. You guys have some solid convention, but what are the subtle things that somebody can be missing? Or what are the things that you see recurring as a question, and then people are just missing a big part of it? Are they going too hard, or are they just not really?
Yeah, great question. I would say it's kind of almost counterintuitive, where one of the core design principles behind ADK was to make agent development as simple as software development. So with a few lines of code, you can have an agent where you can interact with. All you have to do is worry about the instructions and the use case. You specify the model and you're off to the races. But that kind of simplicity sometimes belies, some core architectural decisions that you have to make, where, tool management, and oftentimes you may have to kind of separate agents into multiple agents so you can kind of orchestrate something like a sequential pipeline. Oftentimes you see beginning developers, they try to create one monolithic agent, give it 20 different tools with a huge prompt, and they kind of hope that it kind of just figures out what you should do. But there's ways with ADK where you can kind of make it more systematic and more reproducible from an evaluation standpoint, from an execution standpoint. So I would say it's beyond the initial simplicity, there's a lot of architectural decisions that go into building production ready agents that sometimes people may not kind of realize.
Yeah. I run a workshop and we have a segmentation in the audience where on one side we have what we call the builders, people who are very eager to learn, who are very hands-on, but who don't have any development experience. And then the hardcore developers who have been looking for a solution to adopt. When you are deciding for a product like that, how do you decide first who's your primary audience? And how do you have a segmentation around those different types of developers or people with different experience?
Yeah, great question. I would say the way you build a product around that is to kind of try to cater as much as you can to the diverse spectrum of developers. Some developers just want something that's fully managed, ready to go. Or for something like that, we have Vertex AI Agent Engine, where you don't have to worry about essentially, the concurrency principles and all that. Essentially, you deploy to an endpoint. We manage like the session history for you and so on. But some developers want to kind of manage, is the endpoint, does it have access to GPUs, or does it have, sufficient compute for my tools? So essentially, we try to give developers options that kind of allow them to kind of mix and match and build, the ADK to kind of match their use cases. So from a deployment standpoint, as I mentioned, with the different deployment options, even down to like, something like the database session service, where you could use something like Cloud SQL to, manage your session history. But again, if you're someone who just wants something that's more fully managed, you can use our Vertex AI session service that essentially manages session history for you. So you can kind of just focus on the use case. So it really just comes down to what developers are looking for, but we try to give developers options to kind of allow them to kind of, cater to their use case.
Yeah. But I mean, like, I'm gonna bounce right back on it and says, what is the minimal baggage that you think that a developer needs in order to be to have an optimized, experience with ADK? Because some of the vocabulary used when we go to like the Dev Fest and the type of like audience that we have, that might be very foreign to them. Is it too early to introduce them to it at that time? Or is there like parts of ADK that like that magic moment that we can still share with them?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would say the ADK Web makes that magic moment, a lot easier to kind of, engage with, where essentially you can use something like ADK Create, which is a built-in command. You get a really simple agent. Yes. ADK Web, make sure that you put in your API key or your Vertex AI project, and then then you're interacting with the agent in real time. It can take you less than 3 minutes. And I feel like that's the magic where you put in 3 commands and now you're interacting with an agent. I feel like that's a magic moment. As far as like extending that, magic moment, can you kind of elaborate a little bit more? Maybe on.
Yeah, so the thing is like creating an agent right away, and then you like, okay, I'm talking to something that I just created, or I'm like, interacting with it. But then we know that that's the tip of the iceberg. Deployment comes after, security, memory, and all that kind of stuff. So the thing is, if you have not developed software before, you might not know like those type of hurdle. But like, at what point do we say, okay, now it's starting to be like something serious where software development, like, experience has to come in play?
I would say anything beyond the initial POC. So what you see with a lot of, agent builders where it's DAG based, where you can drag and drop, agent components, you see how they connect. But I feel like once you start moving down to like really production ready workflows, there's things like callbacks that you have to consider, before agent or after agent callbacks, or before model or after model callbacks. There's things like human in the loop, action confirmations that you can support. As you mentioned, short-term, long-term memory and how you manage that, down to like how you configure the state variables. I would say it immediately starts to kind of start requiring, more, I would say not expert, but someone who has, a background in software engineering, because pretty much agent development is in a way kind of just the mirror of good software engineering practices, like, separation of principles. You have different functions for different use cases. You have different agents for different use cases. Knowing how to, optimize, parallel tool calls, doing, async, that kind of requires some sort of, not want to say software background, but you have to understand the principles behind it and why we're doing async, and how you can kind of optimize your functions. So I would say in many ways where to kind of build good agent software, you have to know how to build kind of good software in general.
In general, yep. Yeah. Yeah, so, and then where I'm gonna leave you off is like, basically before ADK, we had LangChain, we had LangGraph, and they're still there. I mean, like, you guys have, if I get you correctly, you have put like a lot of abstraction layer to take away the complexity. But as now, if I go to the other type of the audience, the seasoned developer, what are the things that you feel like, oh, we have done X, Y, and Z for the seasoned developer for them to not worry about it? Is it the security layer? Is it like, the how you put together like that whole sequence? What are the things that you are saying? These are the 3 things that I know if you adopt ADK today, you really do not have to worry about that because we're taking care of that for you.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of the production readiness that comes for the advantage of a seasoned developer with the ADK is the close coupling of the ADK with things like Google Cloud Services. So when you deploy to something like Agent Engine, you don't have to worry about concurrency. You can support 100 agent calls, per minute without you having to really worry about the infrastructure. When it comes to security, essentially you're using the security backend of Google Cloud. So if you deploy to Cloud Run, essentially you can put IAP in front of your agent. There's a lot of things that you can kind of support. So I would say a lot of the production readiness of the ADK comes from like the inherent coupling of, how ADK integrates with Google Cloud. Beyond that, I would say ADK offers obviously some features, like I mentioned, callbacks, that kind of allow really, fine-grained granularity of how the developer wants, model responses to be formatted, or like, LLMs to kind of see the inputs and things of that nature. Yeah, I can go for one more.
So structured responses and all that. Yeah. So yeah, great. So I think, like, if I'm not mistaken, you guys are actually at V1.18.
Yes.
So yeah, so I think like you're at 1.18. Like, how do we keep on like where's the source of truth? Where do we keep on like finding like what's coming up, and what did excite? And that's going to be your last question. What excites you the most about 1.18, and what are you looking forward to into 1.19 or whatever's coming down the road?
Yeah, great question. So with 1.18, there's been a really few innovative features that have come out. One is the ability to create agents with natural language. So you can kind of describe what your use case is, what you're looking for, and actually kind of get initial scaffolding of what your project would look like. So very similar to ADK Create, but rather than a simple agent, you can actually kind of create your scaffolding of your project using natural language. Also, another thing that a lot of like developers like is the kind of the low-code approach, where I don't want to have to start diving into the code so early. I just want to kind of architect my agents more from like a UI standpoint. So we have an agent builder UI that has come out with 1.18 that essentially allows you to build your agents kind of drag and drop type of workflows. So I feel like a lot of developers are going to appreciate that kind of reduced friction. Sometimes you don't want to write code, you just want to visualize, and now we support that with 1.18. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you guys had it right there with Ayo Adedeji, who's the most important person for it's like us developers. He's our direct link. And do you guys have like office hours where developers can reach out and find out more?
Absolutely. So there's an ADK office hours that recently started about 2 weeks ago, where essentially it's global community office hours. You can talk directly with the product team, give them your concerns, things that you like. So it's a great way of kind of engaging with the product team if you would like to. As far as my team, we don't have any global office hours, but that's a great idea. So we'll get on that.
Thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
I really appreciate your time. Thank you.